Welcome to this new episode. It's number 34 of the Cycling Europe podcast. My name is Andrew Sykes. Here in West Yorkshire, it's a beautiful morning at the start of the May Bank holiday weekend. A beautiful morning for cycling, and that's what I'll be doing later today. For most of this episode of the podcast, we're staying in the UK, but our monologue, courtesy of long-time resident Laurence Warren, will take us to Austria. More of that later. But first, the A1. Well, not quite. 100 years ago, the Great North Road closed and the A1 opened, heralding a century of domination by the motorcar. The Cycling Europe podcast meets BBC journalist and one-time San Franciscan cycle courier Steve Silk, who set off on his bicycle to cycle from London to Edinburgh to rediscover what remains of the old road, its stories, milestones and coaching inns. Steve's book, The Great North Road, is published by Summersdale on July 8th.
Yeah, my name is Steve Silk, and my full-time job is as a journalist for the BBC, but I also write books in my spare time. It's very much a sort of spare bedroom type project, and The Great North Road is my third book. My first book came out in 2010. It was called The Wherryman's Way, and it was basically an exploration of parts of the Norfolk Broads, a sort of unfashionable end of the Norfolk Broads. And that was followed up in 2016 by something called Hidden Riverside Norwich, where I took to a canoe to explore the different bits of river and broad in the Norwich area. So that's my sort of background as an author, both with local books based on where I live, but I was really keen to do something with a broader scope. And whilst those two books were coffee table books, I took the photos as well. The Great North Road is very much a sort of classic British travel non-fiction book without any pictures at all. So it's me stepping out of my comfort zone a little bit. Thankfully, Summersdale have come on board, have been fantastic with me, and I'm really looking forward to it coming out in July.
And you managed to say all of that without either using the word cycle or cycling or cyclist, because obviously the book is based upon a cycling journey that you made, otherwise you wouldn't be on this podcast. Are you a long-term cyclist? Is it something that you've done all your life, or is it something that you've come to later on in life?
I'm a bit of a curious one like that. I spent the first 25 years very much as a cyclist, in the way that I think most lads of my generation, my mid-50s, did. I didn't think that I was a cyclist. I just had a bike and I used it to get anywhere and everywhere. And that included having very, very liberal parents who allowed me and three of my mates to cycle from Maidenhead, where I grew up in the Thames Valley, down to Devon and back and stay in youth hostels for 10 days when we were only 14. That's when I probably got the bug. A little bit later, I was lucky enough to be a student and to have a student job in America. I ditched the job I'd arrived for and ended up as a cycle messenger in San Francisco for a few months. And I absolutely loved that too. But now I'm very much a cyclist, and I've got a road bike and I've got a tourer and I've got a mountain bike, and I've done 100-miler around Norwich and a few decent rides like that as part of organised rides. But I have to say there are 20 years in the middle went missing as far as cycling is concerned. And I can't quite explain why that happened and why I just disappeared from the scene for that long. But yes, for the last 10, 11 years, I've been a really keen cyclist, just a combination of being on my own sometimes and with a few lads and lasses, friends in the village. We go out every Saturday without fail. We've got a few plans for a big trek through Wales this June. That's why I bought my mountain bike when I did. So yes, I am a keen cyclist, but I'm not a lifelong one.
There's probably a podcast to be made about your 2 months in San Francisco as a messenger. What was that, back in the 70s, late 70s, 80s?
Oh God, I'm not that old. And this was 1989. And again, it was three lads at that point. We did the old coast to coast thing, first of all, by car in an Oldsmobile 98. We all pitched up in San Francisco, kicked in the park for a few nights because we didn't have any money, usual sort of student shenanigans, really. And we all fell into jobs. And I got this job delivering mostly architectural blueprints and designs for a company on Mission and 6th, the really cool sounding junction in the middle of San Francisco, Mission and 6th. And that's what you delivered in those days. It was sort of mostly those long cylindrical cardboard rolls with designs in between them, delivering them uphill and down dale. Very different to the Deliveroo guys today, although I can't quite pass a Deliveroo driver without a Deliveroo rider without thinking, yeah, I remember those days, mate. I remember that. It's a good life. It's a decent life. So yeah, it's undoubtedly the coolest job I've ever had, and it was just 3 or 4 months living in one of the world's greatest cities, and probably without even realizing it, I was as fit as I've ever been as well.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. I would imagine, yeah, San Francisco in the late 80s on a bike. Did you get a chance to go up and down that coast, the west coast of America at all on your bike?
Not really. I mean, disgraceful, as I understand it, mountain biking was invented, was it not, in Marin County, which is just to the north of San Francisco over the Golden Gate. And I never did it. I don't know. I just became in love with San Francisco as a city. And whilst we did, as I say, coast to coast to get there, and then on a motorbike coming back again, me and one of the two other lads, I know I just didn't have the curiosity to do that. Maybe it was a sort of busman's holiday. I was on the bike during the day and was busy doing other things at all other times. It does, I have to say, feel a long, long time ago. Cross-examine me anymore on the details of what I got up to, and I'd struggle a little bit. Where I was sort of 30 odd years ago.
The chap, I can see him. He's got a beard. He's called Gary something, but somebody out there will know his name. And but yeah, he is that person who invented mountain biking, allegedly. Right. So back to Britain. When did you actually do the journey that we're going to be talking about?
It was way before coronavirus. It was very much a normal May, 2 or 3 years ago. And what I did was I did it, having done a fair bit of research, but it was only in then cycling it that I realized that there was so much more to do in terms of the research afterwards. So probably if I was doing this again, I might do it the other way around. I might be more assiduous in doing the research all the way up to Edinburgh first, and then do the 1 11-day run. But you learn as you go, don't you? And it was much more exciting doing it this way, of course, because I was genuinely sort of, I don't say going into the unknown. I mean, I traveled in those parts of Britain before, but of course you see things very differently when you're a cyclist. So no, it was some time ago that I actually did the bike ride, which means that coronavirus is completely out of the picture here. Coronavirus gets one mention in this book, and that's in relation to Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton lives in a village just off the Great North Road, and everyone says that he did the best work of his long career when he was effectively in lockdown at his mum's house. He had time to think. He was away from Oxford University, and all of the really impressive discoveries of his long career came when he was sort of holed up in Woolsthorpe Manor in a summer in 1660 sometime.
All right, so we can presumably look forward to lots of scientific discoveries being announced in the next 6-12 months. I'll look forward to that.
I should think so.
You say that actually you would have preferred to do the research perhaps beforehand and then do the journey. Actually, I disagree, because when I wrote my books, I'm quite glad I did it quite, I was very ignorant as to what I might find. And I found it fascinating when I was writing the books to actually fill in the details. I think that kept me writing, because I was really interested to know, well, actually, what was that thing that I passed? That building that I remember, what was inside, or what was beyond the, the next over the next hill. So actually, I think you probably did it in the right way.
Interesting. Yeah, I was worried, but it is a timeless book. I hope it's timeless in the sense that a lot of it is to do with history. I just worried a little bit that it might date in terms of what exactly I'd seen. But the fact that I've been back numerous times to check and recheck, and is that pub still open, blah blah blah, means that I am confident that as we go to press, it's as current as it can be.
Your plan is to cycle the Great North Road. Now, people will have heard probably of the Great North Road, but they're more likely to have heard of the A1 or the A1 open bracket, M closed bracket. How close, and what's the association between those two roads, the Great North Road and the A1M? Obviously, for a cycling route, the A1M is either not even an option or not particularly attractive. So what's the connection between the two?
I'll just give you a tiny bit of history here. So first of all, the Great North Road is the original road between London and Edinburgh. As of 1921, the summer of that year, the Ministry of Transport decided that they didn't like names. They wanted roads to have numbers. So that's when the Great North Road became the A1. At that time, there was no such thing as a dual carriageway, pretty much. So in terms of what did the Great North Road look like, well, it looked like any other half decent road across Britain. It didn't differ that much to the road going between two market towns. It didn't need to. There wasn't the volume of traffic to justify it. The internal combustion engine was only just really starting to begin its period of dominance. So in terms of what the Great North Road actually looked like way back when, it didn't look very different to any other road today. In terms of the route, it does differ at various points during the long 400-mile journey. For example, I don't know how technical you want to get, but there's the Old North Road, which runs to the east of the Great North Road and joins it just in the Huntingdon area. So there are two different options there. There are options again when you get to Doncaster. In the real old days, the coaching traffic could only realistically make it as far as York when roads were really basic and turnpikes were only just got going. But as the technology behind the mail coach improved during the late 18th century and the early 19th century, suddenly it became realistic to get up to Newcastle and to Edinburgh. So they started to evolve a different route that went through Wetherby and places like that. And even now, you can look at one route that takes the A1's current route via Scotch Corner, or you can go via Northallerton to Darlington. So the Great North Road is almost more of an idea than it is an actual line connecting different places. Having said that, I did go online before we joined up to look at how many place names there are, how many roads there are that are still called the Great North Road in this country at the moment. And there are a good 85, 90 sections of road between London and Edinburgh that are called the Great North Road. Now, sometimes that's because the motorway or the A road has gone one way and there's a remaining bypass or highway that's just gone the other, and that's kept the original name. So there's all kinds of fragments out there, even if they're not called the Great North Road. These days, the A1 or the A1M likes to bypass villages. So there'll be a little high street that is, I know, part of the original Great North Road. And quite often villagers speak very proudly of the fact that, this used to be the Great North Road, It's there in bits and pieces, but it is not one continuous road by any means these days.
If you were back in the 19th century and you were on your stagecoach from London up to Edinburgh and you took the Great North Road, how much of that do you think you actually cycled?
I would say that it would be less than 10%, There are stretches where the old road is sitting there right next to the new road. I'm thinking of stretches near Auchenbury in Cambridgeshire and around Wetherby in Yorkshire, where it's easy to stay there. Although often those weren't the most pleasant bits of the ride, because if they're long and straight roads, even though the dual carriageway is sitting next to you, drivers want to get up to 60 miles an hour on your road. And as you well know, that is far from pleasant. Having said that, maybe it's more than 10%. Now I think about town centres, actually, because, of course, the old Great North Road went right through the middle of everywhere. So if you add up every high street, if you add up the fact that I'm going through the middle of Newark or Grantham and Stamford, probably I guess actually maybe we could push it up towards 20%. So what I was doing from that point of view was I wanted to stay safe. I wanted to stay alive. I wasn't up for even the shortest stretch of dual carriageway, even if I was technically allowed on it. But I would make sure that I would find the old Great North Road where I could, crisscross it as often as possible, sort of check in back with the motherships, so to speak, every few miles. But my ideal scenario was being on a country lane where I could see the A1, or whether it was the A1 or whether it was the original track of the Great North Road, close enough to see it and to hear it, but safe enough to be away from fast cars.
On the front cover of the book, which is called The Great North Road, there is a fantastic image of you on your bicycle, leaning into a corner, and in the distance there's this beautiful village or town, all very stylized, but it's an amazing image. How accurate is that in terms of how you saw the route and your bike and your luggage? Because you only actually have one pannier on that bike on the cover. Is that how it was?
Yes, I did only have one pannier. But first of all, it's both accurate and incredibly stylized, isn't it? It's stylized, it's idealized. It is a wonderful image. I'm so proud of it. Although, of course, it's not my work. It's a chap called Alexei Erefilov who's designed it. He's more used to, based on what I've seen from him, I haven't met the chap, he designs really gorgeous, quite maybe 100 years ago, pictures of classy Italian cities with, campanile in the background or gondolas or whatever. That's what I'd seen of his work before Summersdale said, look, what do you think? And I loved it immediately, but I thought, well, how's he going to do this? I'm not going through the middle of Lombardy or whatever. He's just managed to create a real sense of movement, hasn't he? First of all, there's a real sense of energy to it. But yeah, look, if you want to get technical, how often is the Great North Road that narrow? How often is there a beautiful stylized village looking just like that, just where you want it, with hills beyond? Probably not all of the time. But I think as an overall sense of what I wanted to do and how I saw the journey, absolutely spot on. And when it comes down to the pannier, yes, I did only have one pannier. I traveled incredibly light. I stayed in hotels, budget hotels normally, the odd Airbnb. My brother-in-law lives handily at the end of day 3, I think it was. I just stuffed a few maps, a couple of books, not enough clothes as it happened, because it was much colder than I thought it was going to be, in that one pannier, and made do. Well,
the village is certainly British, and the road, yeah, fairly British. Those hills, I think they're probably more Tuscany than the Yorkshire Wolds. But anyway, it's an amazing image, and all hats off to the chap who did it. Getting to the bike, you bought an old bike, is that right, to do this?
No, I didn't buy an old bike. I bought an old-fashioned new bike. I bought a Jamis Aurora. It's an American make. I wanted to, we'll come on to Charles Harper, I suspect, one of the guys who sort of helped inspire me, a Victorian gent. So I sort of wanted to be a bit old-fashioned. So I've got this bike in British racing green. I put a Brooks saddle on it. I had my pannier, as I say. It's a tourer. That was a new thing to me. I am no expert on the different kinds of bike, but it really did me proud. I put some decent tires on it as well. It never let me down. I never had a puncture. It was just a really solid bike with what I learned to call bar end shifters to change gear. So everything about it was simple, designed to not break down, and if something did go wrong, to be easily fixable. As it happened, nothing like that happened at all. I had a very, very charmed life on the road from that point of view. So it's not designed for speed, it's designed for sturdiness. It takes a pannier or two, and I loved it, absolutely loved it.
So you mentioned Charles G. Harper. Tell us about him. He gets mentioned quite a lot in the book.
He's my hero. he's my hero as far as the book's concerned. I had this idea of cycling the Great North Road. I had this idea of writing about it. I was kind of confident that there was something there to be done. But then as I started my research, I found that, of course, I wasn't the first person to have thought of this. And way back at the turn of the last century, across 1900 and 1901, Charles G. Harper had done exactly the same thing as me. He was an author, he was a Londoner. He started off by walking the old coach roads of southern England, so the road between London to Brighton, for example, the road between London and Hastings. And he was very much looking back with rose-tinted spectacles on the coaching era. So he's writing in 1900. Coaching heyday was until maybe 1820s, 1830s. His older readers might just have been able to remember some of those days. All roads at that time seemed to be losing out because it was the age of the railway. No one was really taking to the road in any numbers. So he was looking back in a sort of elegiac kind of way at this golden age. Then he walked the shorter roads, but then he realized he had to take on the Great North Road. And he actually got hold of a bicycle, relatively newfangled bicycles in those days, and decided that he would have to cycle it too. So that's his history. He went on to do all 13 of the great coaching routes out of London. And he wrote prodigiously. He was just, he got through, I don't know, it must be 30 or 40 books, not just on roads, but other topographical kind of stuff too. And he writes well, and he's nowadays, he's even quoted by Historic England, who use his illustrations. He does very good pen and ink illustrations throughout all of his books. They use him to sort of record what Britain looked like in that age, just at the turn of the last century.
Did you have a copy of his book with you? Were you following the routes that he was describing, or were you kind of fairly easy in terms of not necessarily following his exact path?
I had both copies of the book with me. I absolutely had to. And whenever I sat down in a town centre or a park bench or whatever it was, I would get one of the volumes. It's 2 volumes, The Great North Road, out of the pannier. And it would always add to my enjoyment of what I'd seen or what I was about to see. And his descriptions were and are really, really good quality, absolutely top stuff. In terms of the route, he had the great advantage of not having to really worry about cars at all. They were so few and far between in 1900 that he just went straight up. Some of those routes I mentioned earlier, he then went back and did the alternative route as well, whereas I just did A to B was plenty enough for me. He couldn't really help me in terms of the pure route, because so much of that is now covered in tarmac and crash barriers and all the rest of it. But of course, every town centre quite often survives in varying states of repair. And the further north I got, I found that the less things had changed. So the further north I got, the more I could trust, if that's the right word, his descriptions of what I was going to see. And once you get north of Newcastle, really, I would say that in terms of the route, things have changed very little indeed. Clearly, again, I still didn't want to be on a fast single track A road, but there are fewer bypasses and there's just been less development, I think. So yeah, the further north I went, the better a guide he was.
Now, you make an interesting comment in the book, and I'm just going to quote what you said. You were aware of an internal dialogue between the "that looks interesting" devil and the "keep on moving" angel. So by the end of the trip, was it the devil or the angel that had won?
The devil won, hands down. And that's simply because you've got to explore. When you're there, you cannot just ignore that interesting side road. And the other thing from my point of view is that normally I'm either at work or I'm doing stuff with my family, or let's say I'm on holiday. I'm very lucky in all of those things. But this trip over the 11 days was one of the very few times in recent years where I could do absolutely what the hell I liked without having to answer to anybody. And that, as you know, is a wonderful thing, isn't it? And quite a rare thing. So I just wanted to appreciate that and to make the most of that. So it's a stupid little example, but I went to Carlton-on-Trent in Nottinghamshire. It's a very small, unprepossessing kind of village that the Great North Road, which is very separate, incidentally, to the A1 at that point, the Great North Road goes through. But it's called Carlton-on-Trent, and I haven't seen the Trent. So you've just got to go off and see the Trent, haven't you? If there's a sign saying Ferry Lane, and off you go. And there, off the beaten track, is one of Britain's great rivers, sitting there with the route of an old ferry that went across and various bits of industrial archaeology here, there, and everywhere. And it was only 10 minutes, it was only a quarter of an hour out of my ride, but you can't not do that, can you? You've got to take the road less traveled and see where it takes you.
You'd obviously allocated 11 days to do this. You've talked about the route that you took. Did you actually also have accommodation booked along the way? Were you committed to fixed points along the way that you had to stop? Or did you just kind of decide that at the end of the day and find a Travelodge or wherever to stay in?
It was a mixture of the two. I knew I had to get to my brother-in-law and sister-in-law in South Witham in Lincolnshire at a certain point. I was going to meet up with my mate Dave at the end of my day 8, but I kept things in between quite fluid, and I'm really glad that I did. And it was great having a mate along for the last 3 days, absolutely fantastic, but it did mean that I had to get there to a deadline, and probably I would have liked to have, all things being equal, I would have liked to have been even more flexible. What I'd actually done was have 11 days set out, but with a rest day in the middle somewhere. But in the end, just because the way I was feeling, and actually a quite an annoying north wind that followed me I was going Great North Road, cycling north, and guess which direction the wind was coming from for the first 8 days. So because of that, I thought, rather than do 50 miles day off, 60 miles, I decided to sort of split it up and just sort of keep going. So I was very grateful for that flexibility. I don't know about you, but sometimes you feel like you can cycle forever, and other days it just ain't happening, is it? So some of them I did just book Airbnb a day ahead. In Northallerton, for example, I got to the Golden Lion in the middle of Northallerton and just thought, wow, this is great. And just thought, all right, sod it, half day. It was one of the few coaching inns that I actually stayed in. I visited a lot of others and had a lot of lovely coffees in the grand old coaching inns. But the Golden Lion in Northallerton I was just bowled over by it. And you need to have that flexibility, don't you? I just thought, right, there's a Sunday roast over there. This place looks great. Have you got a room? Yes, you have. Right, bang, I'm in. And just did it like that. And that's how it should be, isn't it, when you're on a bit of a cycling adventure like that?
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. More of my chat with Steve Silk in a few minutes, but now the monologue. And this month it comes from Laurence Warren. What's the first thing you think of when you think of Austria? Laurence?
Skiing is probably the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Austria. If you are old enough, you might recall the sound of music or even Mozart. Skiing means big, steep mountains. So you might think Austria is not the obvious place to go for a holiday on a bike. You'd be wrong. Between the mountains are valleys, and along the valleys are rivers. And beside the rivers are wonderful bicycle touring routes. Austria is only a small country, but it has more than its fair share of long-distance cycle trails. Austria also has borders with 8 other countries. I wonder if you can name them. This means that many routes cross borders, giving the opportunity for multi-country rides or arriving at a point where 3 countries meet. There are 5 Eurovelo routes running through the country or following Austria's borders. I am Laurence Warren, originally a Londoner, now living in Austria. I've been cycle touring with my Austrian wife Irmgard for close on 40 years. When we began, it was so simple. Few signposted bike routes, no GPS, internet or mobile phones. We just had old-fashioned paper maps, which became increasingly tatty as the days turned into weeks on the road. Cycle touring was considered rather retro before retro was cool. I've lived in the Alps nearly 20 years and cycled Austria from end to end and from top to bottom. We live in a small village at 1,000 metres. That's 400 vertical metres at a painful 12% above the Salzach Valley. We've cycled along the Rhine, the Rhone, the Moselle, the Main, the Oder-Neisse, the Elbe and Moldau in Czechia, the Po in Italy, and battled our way the 1,400 kilometres length of the former east-west German border. I've toured alone in New Zealand, Greece and Cuba. However, we have embraced some new technology. We use Komoot on some trips, and after years climbing the big cols in the Pyrenees, the Mont Ventoux twice, and the Alpe d'Huez, our 75-year-old knees need a bit of assistance, and in 2020 we began to use e-bikes. To our minds, Austria's offering to touring cyclists can't be beaten. Dramatic scenery, lakes and mountains, good, well-marked trails, and high-standard, affordable hospitality. Austrians are enthusiastic cyclists, and bike routes are well signposted and generally follow small farm roads or dedicated asphalt tracks. Where they are not asphalted, tracks through forests and beside meadows are generally well surfaced and maintained. Most routes are suitable for children. The country relies on tourism, and cycle touring has grown rapidly in importance in recent years. The standard of accommodation is as high as you will find anywhere: clean, efficient, welcoming, and not too expensive. Hotels, apartments, B&Bs and campsites are not difficult to find in the mountains, where the hospitality industry is geared for big numbers of skiers. If you ride on the fly, like me, without booking ahead, there should not be a problem. So what are the big river rides? The Danube flows through Austria and is a very popular summer route. It's flat, with cycle tracks on each side. Organised groups ride the 400 kilometres from Passau to Vienna, and in the high season it can be like a superhighway. From Vienna, it flows to the Black Sea through many more countries. The Inn rises in Switzerland and flows through the Tyrol into Germany and joins the Danube at Passau. The Tauern-Radweg, or bike route, follows the Salzach River from the huge Krimmel waterfall to Salzburg, where it connects with the Saarlach, Inn and onto the Danube. The Drau River route runs from Italy along the southern border of Austria and on into Slovenia. The rivers Mur and Enns also have their own popular bike tracks. All these trails are 300 to 400 kilometres long. They link together so you can ride till the winter snows arrive. At peak times, these main routes can be relatively busy. With a little investigation and imagination, you will find thousands of kilometres of quiet, marked trails through beautiful, well-groomed countryside with idyllic villages, lakes, plenty of castles, churches and monasteries. But not all of Austria is mountains. To the far north of the country is the Weinviertel, quiet, rolling countryside, quaint streets of private wine press houses, the Kellergassen, and miles of vineyards and fields of sunflowers. Southeast of Vienna, along the Hungarian border, Burgenland is red wine country and famed for the huge Neusiedler Lake, which is 90 kilometres around, but just a metre deep. This is the warmest part of the country, and there are miles of bike trails here. There are so many opportunities to link marked trails to make any length of tour you wish. There are 9 provinces, and each is responsible for its cycle network and publishes detailed maps of routes. Some are numbered and others have names, like the Mozart-Radweg, which crosses into Germany. The cities too have clear, dedicated bike routes, and of course plenty of opportunities for a cultural break. Salzburg, Innsbruck, Linz, Graz and Vienna are all worth a visit. If you want a challenge, one big climb is the Großglockner, Austria's highest mountain. Rising up from the Tauernradweg near Zell am See, this historic road is popular with motorcyclists and tourists in summer. But if you start the 13-kilometre climb to 2,500 metres very early, you will have a quiet but spectacular ride. There are other big climbs in the Tyrol, including the Kaunertal, where after 29 bends and 1,900 vertical metres, you reach the glacier at 2,750 metres. From our village, and from many others in the mountains, there are forest roads which allow cyclists, though some roads don't, to climb to an alm or high-altitude farm, where the farmer and cattle spend their summer. There will almost certainly be a good homemade snack and a beer waiting for you there. This is a very special feature of Austria, and well worth asking where you can ride or hike up to an alm. One-way rides work well, as the local rail system is well geared to handling bikes. The regional express, Rex, and local S-Bahn trains require no forward booking, have plenty of bike space, and in most cases you can wheel your bike in. Faster trains require pre-booking and have only limited space. Most stations these days have lifts, whereas in my young day, hauling bikes and luggage up and down flights of stairs was the norm. Salzburg Airport, pre-COVID, had regular flights from London. It's a small airport used to handling skis and bikes and very user-friendly, and is well placed to start a wonderful bike tour through the mountains. Now it's time for us to set off on another trip, but I'll leave you with a warning. Once you get the bug, and you love setting off in the morning to somewhere new, not knowing where you will sleep that night, the bug will never leave you. The urge only gets stronger.
Thanks, Laurence. Laurence has sent me a list of useful contacts and some stunning photographs of him and his wife cycling in Austria, and I'll be posting these to cyclingeurope.org in early June. If you'd like to contribute your own monologue, please get in touch via email podcast@cyclingeurope.org or via social media @cyclingeurope. In the next episode of the podcast, which will see me revisit episode 21 and my investigation into the epic early 20th century European cycle tour of Maximilian J. St. George, the monologue will take us along Eurovelo 15 with Simon Garland. More of that soon. Meanwhile, it's back to Steve Silk and his journey along the Great North Road.
Looking at the map, kind of the east of England, you tend to think of it as being quite flattish. The hills tend to be in the west, the Peak District, the Yorkshire Dales, the Lake District, etc. How was the route profile? Was it a very flat route, or did you actually encounter many hills along the way?
I would say it is relatively flat for the first 200 miles or so. And again, you've got to think about the history of this road. it was designed for horsepower. So if they could avoid a hill, they would. We don't have to worry about that anymore, generally. And indeed, modern roads have often taken away the steepest of hills. Indeed, engineers were doing that even in the coaching age. So what the Great North Road does is quite pragmatically jump from valley to valley, heading generally north. It'll pick up a Roman road for a bit if it's useful, going in the right direction, and it'll hop off again once it isn't. So I would say that until roughly Darlington's, that's further than 200 miles actually, isn't it? Nearer the 250 mark. It was pretty good. I'm not a cyclist who can effortlessly do 100 miles in a day. I've done it but once. I'm just a bloke who likes cycling and likes history and loves exploring unfashionable bits of Britain. That was my motivation, and the bike is just the best way of doing that. And when you're thinking about the Great North Road and its coaching history, you're almost traveling almost the same miles per hour as they would have done 200 odd years ago. So it was just perfect for all those things. So in terms of a challenge, if you're a really tough cyclist and you want to get the feat of ascent under your belt, then I would say the first 250 miles of it aren't too much of a challenge. But just as you get further north, it does get tougher. I remember coming out of Darlington reminded me that I was up north. Ferry Hill is a little bit of a tickler there. And then beyond Newcastle, and our biggest day was day 10. So that was starting off at Sea Houses and finishing off at Dunbar. Sea Houses is off the Great North Road, but all the tourist accommodation is over that side. That was pretty decent. We knew about that.
Do you think you would have been eligible to be a member of the North Road Cycling Club? Because in the book you say it's a sort of super club for Victorian cyclists. It's difficult not to admire these pioneers. To join, you had to prove you had ridden 100 miles in a day. Hard enough now, but even tougher in a world of basic bikes, dirt roads, and non-pneumatic tyres. So what do you reckon? Do you think they would have had you as a member or not?
Well, I did. I've done 100 miles around Norwich. I haven't done it in a day on the Great North Road. So hopefully I'd have squeezed in. The North Road Cycling Club still exists, by the way, in Hertfordshire. I must get in contact with them and tell them that there's a book out there. There's an excellent history of the first 50 years of it that I quote from. Some of the most remarkable early cyclists were members of that club. There's a real job to be done there, actually, in someone updating that history. There's a lot of real quality there in terms of the people who rode, and then the people who stopped races when Britain moved from racing to time trials. That was because of 3 guys cycling up the Great North Road in Cambridgeshire. There was an incident involving a lady with a pony and trap. Apparently, she was to blame, not the cyclists, but there was this moral panic, and road cycling was banned within 3 years in this country. And arguably that's why we didn't have a Tour de France winner for so long, because we went off on this weird other route of time trials and early morning starts, clandestine meetups, all that sort of stuff, all started because of an incident on the Great North Road in 1894.
Yeah, and what's betting? It was front page on the Daily Mail back in 1894. Is Stevenage in Hertfordshire?
Stevenage is Herts.
Right, okay, because I liked the bit about you talking about the centre of Stevenage. You talked about the development of Stevenage as a town and how they actually built in cycleways. And when I was reading it, I was thinking, God, if this had really taken off, we could have been in a position nationwide, a bit like the Netherlands are today. Tell us about the history of Stevenage and what's it like now in terms of its cycling facilities.
Stevenage is a classic new town, and like all new towns, it had a sense of idealism when it started. These were people that were in general moving out of London, where they'd had to commute through very smog-filled streets, and they were moving to somewhere out in the countryside that was going to be designed properly with green spaces, with residential neighbourhoods here and then everyone would go the other side of the Great North Road, as it happened, to the industrial side here. So there was a lot of idealism involved in it. And as part of that, why on earth would you want to drive to work when your workplace was only 2 or 3 miles away? You would cycle, would you not? Particularly when they've produced 26 miles of cycleways within that town centre environment. So they did that throughout the 1950s and the 1960s. And the guy who designed it got an OBE and an MBE for his efforts. It was really pioneering stuff. Although I suspect it happened in other new towns too. It wasn't just Stevenage, but Stevenage got a bit of a name for itself, and it sort of features in a 1970s Ladybird book called The Story of the Bicycle as this sort of place that's got it right. So I do find this really interesting, because we always look to the Dutch, don't we, and perhaps more lately the Danes, for this sense of they've got it right, we've got it wrong. I think we, the Brits, got it right to a certain extent in the 50s and the 60s, but it was just unfashionable. I presume it was a sense of you've got to be seen to have a car. I don't know, I wasn't alive in the 50s. But I think it just became a bit of a status symbol that you wanted to have a car and you would drive to work, and that cycling became seen as very unfashionable. Now that's, of course, massively changed now, hasn't it? But perhaps only in the last 10 or 15 years. So when you do get to Stevenage, it is still an absolute joy to cycle around. They're still there. But some of those single carriageways in the middle of Stevenage have been converted to dual carriageways when they're not really needed. If everyone used the cycleways, then Eric Claxton, the town planner who I mentioned earlier, his original design would have worked. It was just because suddenly we got fixated with the internal combustion engine that suddenly they needed to expand them. So Stevenage, yes, is a really good little example there of something that survives and just offers a sort of alternative vision of how Britain might have developed.
Yeah, I've never had a good reason to visit Stevenage, but you've almost given me one. I'm tempted to, if I'm passing, I'll kind of look out.
No, not if you're passing. You've got to go to Stevenage, and you've got to go in the museum as well. It's a classic of its type. One of the things I particularly enjoyed about this is going to obscure museums in the most unlikely places. This celebration of Newtown life in Stevenage, English bagpipes in Morpeth, King Cole and the Joy of the Railways in Doncaster. Little provincial museums are there to be treasured.
Yeah, one of my biggest disappointments when I cycled from Tarifa to Noordkap back in 2015 is arriving in this tiny little village in the middle of the Spanish countryside and discovering that the cheese museum was closed. But it was a Monday. I really wanted to visit and kind of spend about 2 hours in this cheese museum, but it was closed. What happened in Grantham? In the book, you say you had a mini meltdown. What happened there?
Well, this is me being a real amateur, basically. You know that when you're cycling, you consume vastly more calories than you do in normal life. I sort of knew that in my head, but wasn't living up to it. So the previous day, after a pretty ropey breakfast, by about 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, I had realized I was running on empty and just bowled into this beautiful little village, which just happened to have loads of flapjack in the village shop. So I was saved, but I didn't learn my lesson. So the following day, I'd had a not substantial enough breakfast, had done 20 odd miles, had made it through Grantham, and just pretty much fell off the bike with, it's not hunger, is it? It's just absolute exhaustion and a sense that I do not have a single drop left of energy. And cyclists call it bonking. It's a well-known phenomenon. You feel a complete idiot when you do it, because the minute you realize what it is, you can sort of go fast rewind and think, God, yeah, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I do that? So yeah, I just sat in this really dodgy service station on the outskirts of Grantham and just thought, right, well, this is it. And it was mainly the thought that previous night, I'd stayed with my brother-in-law, and I just could not look him in the eye, that I'd have had to return to him and say, I failed. So I just stuffed loads of cake down me, had another coffee, got back on the bike, thought, well, I'll see how I go. And in the end, of course, it was all right. But it was a real lesson. You know, you've absolutely got to take fueling seriously when you're on a bike. And when you're doing 50 odd miles a day, for me, that's a big deal. You know, that's a big deal. And you've really got to get organized with it. And I really was afterwards.
What was your favorite section of the route?
My favorite section of the route would start in at Berwick and continue into Scotland. That's for a number of reasons. First of all, the last 3 days, I was with my mate Dave, and as you know, cycling with someone else is so different, isn't it? You almost forget that you're putting in effort on the bike when you're just chatting away. So that made a difference. I'm glad that I didn't do it with someone all the time over 11 days. I think it's a really good thing to have someone just to help you over the finishing line. And I have to say, I put him on the front during some of the tougher sections as well. And I came along in his slipstream. So that was good. But just in terms of more importantly, the geography and the scenery and the landscape, it changes almost instantaneously once you cross the border. It's the first international border I've crossed as a cyclist. That feels good. And that stretch, Berwick, I just love. The coast up there are tiny little places that I'd certainly never heard of. Pease Bay, Coburn's Path, up towards Dunbar are just absolutely spectacular. You'd climb a lot and then you descend, you know, swooping down into these new valleys at 30 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour. Every field seemed to be full of oilseed rape. Every skylark in the country seemed to be twittering overhead. It was absolutely idyllic. And because you're in a different country and because you're traveling that much more slowly, you appreciate the differences. So you appreciate the differences in architecture when you cross over into Scotland. And of course, the accents, and then the beer's different and the banknotes are different. And all that sort of stuff was there to be appreciated. And there was just a real sense that this was going to be a really good finale to the journey. So I think that last sort of maybe 60 miles into Edinburgh, absolutely thoroughly loved, and really makes me think I must go and cycle in Scotland again soon.
I actually cycled Berwick to Edinburgh myself last summer. Did you go to St Abb's Head?
No, I didn't. I believe that's on the route. Is it called Route 76? There is a cycle route that does that, isn't there? We were more shadowing the good old Great North Road, of course. So I remember going to Eyemouth, which we shouldn't have done. We went wrong and ended up there. And I believe St Abb's Head is quite close to there. But no, we didn't quite hug the coast that far. I'll have to look at a map to confirm that. But that's my memory of things there.
Yeah, St Abb's Head was amazing. You can sit on the cliffs and watch these birds, and the view north along the coast from St Abb's Head is just phenomenal. I don't think I've seen a bit of the British coast which actually is equal in just grandeur and drama as that view from St Abb's Head. So if you go back, make sure you detour a bit to the coast. Did you follow the John Muir Way from Dunbar?
A little bit, and I certainly enjoyed the museum in Dunbar. Yes, we followed that a little bit, and then that's coast to coast, isn't it? That's from Dunbar to Helensburgh from memory. So we set off from Dunbar on it, but then again stuck more closely to the A199 as the Great North Road is in that part before heading down to the coast. I love the John Muir story and the fact that he pretty much, you know, created the idea of national parks in America and went off wild camping with Roosevelt, the president at the time, pretty much just the two of them to say, look, Roosevelt, this is what you've got to do. We've got to save all this splendor and make it nature first. It's quite a story, and they're of course very proud of him up there, as they should be.
I interviewed a chap called Marcus Stitz for the podcast a few months ago, and he's a German Edinburgh-based cyclist up in Scotland, and he made a great video about the John Muir Way, and he talked about it in the podcast. Quite an interesting story. I've done this in the wrong order. I should have asked you what the least favourite bit was before asking you the favourite bit. Okay, but you enjoyed the bit from Berwick to Edinburgh the best. Which bit did you not enjoy?
There was a bit in Nottinghamshire that just seemed to go on forever. And I'm sorry, Nottinghamshire listeners, it's nothing personal, but you know, there are days on the bike when you just don't seem to be getting anywhere. And Retford was about 20 miles away for about 2 hours. And however I cycled, I just wasn't getting any closer to it. I loved it when I got there. I think that doesn't say much about Nottinghamshire. It just says everything about the vagaries of cycling, that some days it's absolute hell to even get through 30 odd miles. That was one low point in terms of me being me. And there's always that thing when you're cycling, isn't there? Northallerton to Darlington wasn't much fun because it's the A167 is one of the Great North Road alternatives there. It's an A road. It's single track in each way. People wanted to get to work. They wanted to get past me. That's not much fun. So most of the time it was based on how heavy my legs were, or what the actual terrain was, or the cycling conditions in terms of traffic, rather than anything else. There was no part of this journey, there's no part of Britain that I think, well, that's a dump. I just don't think like that about this country, really. I just really enjoy exploring lesser explored places, and every little bit of Britain had something to offer. The Great North Road starts off in London and it finishes in Edinburgh, two great cities. It goes through Newcastle, which is on my list of one of the world's great cities as well. But there are loads of other places, Stephen, if we've already mentioned, Newark, Doncaster, where there's plenty to entertain you and plenty to learn about, if I believe you're going with the right attitude.
So if you had to do the whole thing again, or if you had to do a little bit again, which bit would you go back and actually spend a bit more time exploring?
One of the things I think I probably would do again is that my day one, started in my Norfolk village where I am now, and involved me cycling to the nearest station in rural Suffolk and then getting down to London before starting at lunchtime. And that was a silly thing to do, really. Maybe actually the best thing to do would be to start off in London and then do it in different chunks. Or maybe another thing to do, if I had more money, would be to only stay at these grand coaching inns at every stage. But you're looking at 150 quid a pop, probably. Some of them certainly 100 quid. So that's 1,500 quid before you've even, bought yourself your first coffee. So that would be another way of doing it. Northumberland really was fascinating. I've just discovered that there's a new mountain bike route called the Sandstone Trail. It ends up at Berwick, or it starts at Berwick, depending on which way you do it, and I think goes down to Hexham. I've literally only just found out about it in the last few days, and that would cross some of what I did. So Northumberland does have an appeal for me. I was a student in Newcastle a long time ago, so I got a feel for the country up there a long time ago, and that was one of the reasons why I guess the Great North Road appealed to me in the first place, was that I had a bit of a sense of it in that part of the world. And there's just so much wonderful emptiness out there, isn't there? So much to explore. And of course, in those parts of England, everyone chats to you. It's just such a friendly place to be as well.
At the very end of the book, you list your top 10 bike touring tips. Don't worry, I'm not gonna ask you to read them all out, because if anybody wants to know them, they can buy the book. But what would be your, let's say, 3 of those 10? And I'm looking at them now. I think I agree with all of them, but which of those 10 would you say are your top 3 tips for cycle touring?
Look after your backside is tip number 1, for a very good reason. Skimp on proper cycling kit if you have to, I say, but get the best pair of padded shorts that money can buy. I do think that's the most important thing that you can do. Everything else is an extra, but you certainly know about it on about day 5 or day 6 if you haven't done that. I think getting up in the morning is a very good idea. Sounds stupid, doesn't it? But a couple of times I sort of dillied and dallied a little bit and wasn't on the road till 9:30. I'm a firm believer that early miles are good miles. The whole day falls into place if you've got the first 15 or 20 miles under your belt before you've even gone near a coffee shop. Everything else sort of fits in from there. And it's tip number 10, but it probably should be higher up on the list. Talk to people. You are on a bike. You've got all the time in the world. you've got license to break the normal rules about not chatting to strangers, I think. And you, of course, always find out more interesting stuff if you do. And it just helps you relax and helps you really appreciate where you are and pick up that top tip about not going to the place that's in the guidebooks, but the other restaurant that's at the other end of the high street or whatever it is. I think those would be my top three.
Yeah, that one about getting up in the morning. I mean, clearly everybody gets up in the morning, but getting up at a good time and setting off, because it is just a golden moment that, if the sun's shining, the sun's low in the sky, things tend to look better either at dawn or dusk in the evening. But also that thing about not having a care in the world. You can worry about your accommodation later in the day, but those first few hours of the day, either side of breakfast, if you're buying a coffee or whatever, they're just they are special moments, and I would definitely agree with that. As far as the saddle goes, or what was it again? Number one, look after your backside. Well, if you had a Brooks saddle, that's the key thing about your backside.
But I still needed to discover chamois cream on day 7, which I'd never used before. It did me reasonably well, but it wasn't the only answer.
It's a very Marmite discussion, isn't it? The Brooks saddle. People love them, people hate them. I'm kind of in the love category. I think they're fantastic, but I know some people don't like them at all.
I sort of started off with it as a sort of stylistic thing, actually. I just didn't think my bike looked good enough without one. I started off just being a bit of a poser about it, I guess. But I have come to love it, yeah.
So finally, you mentioned that Charles G. Harper had written all these different books about heading off on different routes around Britain. Are you planning to emulate any of his other journeys?
As you say that, I reach for 2 hefty volumes here. I haven't completely made up my mind yet, but yes, that is definitely the plan. And I don't think anyone would guess the other old coaching road that I'm planning on doing. The top 6 are the A1 to A6. They go by the acronym or acrostic or whatever it is. Every day, please obey the highway code. So Edinburgh, Dover, please is Portsmouth, obey is Bath, highway is Holyhead, and code is Carlisle. So you'd expect me to have done one of those 6, but instead I'm going for what Harper calls the Oxford, Gloucester and Milford Haven Road in 2 hefty volumes. You and I would know that more commonly as the A40. So a bit of an obscure one, but I think absolutely fascinating in terms of where it goes. So it sets off from London, up the Uxbridge Road originally. I'd probably call the book Oxford Street because it goes to Oxford, and that's why Oxford Street is Oxford Street, of course. So you've got the Chilterns, you've got the Cotswolds, Wales, and the Wye Valley, and then through all the way to the coast. These days, the A40 goes to Fishguard. In Harper's day, it went to Milford Haven. There's lots of complicated stuff out there that I don't quite understand yet. It's quite a hefty one, about 250 miles, I think, not as long as the Great North Road, but right up there. So who knows? That's because of lockdown, I haven't actually cycled half a mile of it yet, but that's the one that I'm just starting to think about and need to persuade my family that I might need to be absent without leave for in the months and years to come.
Well, yeah, I'm just looking, the A40 through Wales and down the Wye Valley is beautiful, and then through the Brecon Beacons again.
Yeah, Brecon Beacons, yeah.
That's a beautiful place. It kind of heads a bit further north than the south coast of Wales. So that should be a fantastic trip.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, I grew up in the south. So, everyone knows the A40. It's the road that goes to Oxford. No one gives it a moment's thought the minute it leaves Oxford, or maybe that's just a London-centric view of things. But it's quite a road. There's a lot there to be explored, and it's one of those ones that I think has been a little bit forgotten. So perhaps not as dual carriagewayed as the Great North Road is. So plenty to go at there, I think. I hope.
Just to finish off with your book, The Great North Road, it's published in July.
Yeah, The Great North Road is published on July the 8th by Summersdale. It's already there to pre-order with Amazon, and no doubt all decent local bookshops will have it as well. I'm on Twitter as Great North Road 2. That's the numeral 2. And there is a website too, greatnorthroad.info. But Twitter's the best way in, I would say.
So who has Great North Road 1 or without the 1?
Someone has Great North Road 1 who's hasn't posted for an awfully long time and got about 15 followers, is my memory of it. So I should have gone Great North Road A1, probably would have been a better name, wouldn't it? But hey, we are where we are. And certainly you've got pictures there of some of the routes and the front cover of the book and various other musings.
Well, if you send Great North Road without 1 or 2, whoever it is, if you send them a copy of the book, they might relinquish their Twitter handle to you.
Oh, no, that's not a bad. Yeah, that would be a good little bribe, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And then I could seize top spot.
Well, thank you for talking to me, and good luck with the book when it comes out.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
And thanks to you for having listened to episode 34 of the Cycling Europe podcast. Thanks also to Steve and to Laurence for their contributions. If you'd like to get in touch, then please email podcast@cyclingeurope.org or on social media @cyclingeurope. If you like what you hear in the podcast, then please consider reviewing or giving us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Amazon Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you happen to be listening to the podcast. And if you'd like to contribute financially, that's now possible by offering to buy us a coffee. Well, kind of. If you visit ko-fi.com, that's ko-fi.com/Cycling Europe, you can do just that. There's also a link on the homepage of cyclingeurope.org. Thanks for listening, stay safe and happy cycling.